Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Jockey Club's 73rd Annual Roundtable Conference. We have a busy agenda, so we're going to get right to it. Today's first speaker is Sean Smealy, founder and managing partner of ACG Advocacy of Washington, D.C. Sean is well known to many here for creating the political strategy that helped us pass the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Act. He's going to share the view from our nation's capital, and it's a good view right now. We have some exciting news to talk about, including the details of the recent passage of a favorable tax bill for thoroughbred owners. Sean, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Everett, and congratulations, by the way. 8 years ago, I had the honor to address the roundtable about the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Act, which at the time was still 3 years away from becoming law. It was clear then, as it remains today, the industry did the right thing and the smart thing for pushing the passage of that bill. The recent Supreme Court decision to not review HISA anytime soon is great news. I hope that HISA's opponents will now move on to other, more pressing matters. Indeed, continued and relentless litigation only contributes to one of the few legitimate concerns of HISA, its cost. My understanding that the cost of litigation is now well into the millions. Let HISA be the law of the land and of our industry, and let's work to make it the best it can be. From a Washington perspective, racing has entered a new political phase. As with most industries, the federal government looms large, for better or worse. Inarguably, when Congress passed the Interstate Horse Racing Act in the 70s, it threw the industry a lifeline. It was not without its downsides, but interstate wagering, something racing exclusively enjoyed for decades, helped keep racing afloat and helps it to this day. On the other hand, the tax bill of 1986 sent the breeding and racing industry into a recession that took many years from which to emerge. For the last several years, the industry's had the luxury of one of its own, Kentucky Senator Mitch McConnell, as the Senate Republican leader, one of the top 4 leadership positions in Congress. Indeed, without Senator McConnell's urging, HISA would have never been signed into law, and over the years, he almost single-handedly protected our industry. We owe a huge debt of gratitude to Senator McConnell and his staff for the countless hours they put on our behalf. But times have changed, and we discovered just how much so when consideration of the recently passed One Big Beautiful Bill. While the industry was focused on restoring 100% depreciation of a horse purchase, another change threatened to undo all the good that bonus depreciation would have done. In the House version of the bill, a technical change was included which would have no longer allowed offsetting horse racing expenses with investment income. This would have significantly impacted the vast majority of horsemen. This provision went unnoticed during the House consideration of the bill, and it was only brought to our attention 2 weeks before the Senate began consideration. And here I want to give a special thanks to Jen Shaw of Dean Dorton, who made Jim Gagliano and the NTRA aware of this provision. Quickly, the industry marshaled the resources it had to educate lawmakers of the potentially devastating impact of this tax change. I want to commend Tom Rooney, the head of the NTRA, and his team. He called upon his former colleagues and did what was necessary to educate and cajole Congress. I also want to thank Hunter Bates and Phil Maxson. Together, we made up the DC-based war room for this effort. Removing this provision was not going to be a walkover. Wealthy horsemen, as you can imagine, are not high in the sympathy scale. But our message was simple. Fewer owners meant fewer horses, meant fewer races, meant fewer fans, and fewer jobs. As many of you now know, the offending House provision was taken out, 100% bonus depreciation, bonus depreciation was included, and as importantly, made permanent. So now if you buy a horse, any losses can be offset by investment income, and you can fully depreciate the cost at the time of the purchase. This is a great outcome for racing, and hopefully will lead to more owners, more foals, more races, more fans, and more jobs. I would say that the most important lesson taken from this effort was how the industry was able to rally without relying on a Senate Majority Leader McConnell. It was an industry team effort and should be a roadmap on how the industry needs to operate in Washington in the future. We actually began to follow this roadmap before we had a problem. We knew we had a problem with the tax bill. The first order of business was to educate new Majority Leader John Thune of South Dakota. Luckily for us, Senator Thune was familiar with our industry as he is a strong supporter of HISA from his days as chairman of the Senate Commerce Committee. Kudos to the Jockey Club stewards in recognizing that the industry needed to reach out to him again. In May, the stewards put together a luncheon for the new Majority Leader and the New York City headquarters. Special appreciation to NTRA PAC, Barbara Banke, Mark Holliday, David O'Rourke, and many others in this room today who supported this event. As it did with HISA, the Jockey Club showed real leadership in spearheading this event. It proved not only be a great success, but wonderful timing as well. This lunch in early May really helped the industry immeasurably in June. Once we discovered the House tax revision, we immediately called upon Senator Thune and our other current Republican champions in Congress, Senator McConnell, and especially Congressman Andy Barr of Kentucky. Andy was instrumental in getting the House leadership to agree to drop their own provision in the final bill. We also called upon Senator Tommy Tuberville of Alabama, a racing enthusiast and, little-known fact, teenage employee at Oaklawn. He pressed the Senate leadership relentlessly on our behalf. Members of the Jockey Club, the NTRA, the Breeders' Cup, and Barbara Banke all made calls and all made their voices heard. We also joined forces with other organizations who opposed this change. Together, we created enough noise that the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee finally relented and removed the provision. My dad used to say, there's no education in the second kick of a mule. We dodged a bullet this time, and my hope is that we can stay vigilant and united on the issues that benefit or hurt the industry. I also believe that the industry needs to better support their friends in Washington and work to develop new friends. Those members and senators from states with racing need to be active champions for our causes. We are fortunate that 3 of the top 4 leadership positions in Congress come from racing state members. For example, many folks in this room have a great relationship with Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer of New York, who has been helpful to us in the past. We are also very fortunate to have champions like Paul Tonko of New York, who not only spearheaded the HISA legislation, but co-chairs the Congressional Horse Caucus. For states without racing, their representatives need to understand how important racing is to the country as a whole. And it's a great story we have to tell. The horse industry as a whole contributed an estimated $177 billion to the U.S. economy in 23 and over 2.2 million jobs. Horse racing and breeding alone accounted for 36 billion of that and has nearly half a million jobs. My other takeaway from this effort is that the industry is fortunate to have what is called in the lobbying world strong grass tops support. Many of you in this room, I would say a vast majority of you in this room, have personal relationships with policymakers in Washington. And if you don't, you probably have the ability to easily develop them. Your voices make a difference with key decision makers. We need your help on issues important to the industry, and I can assure you there will always be issues. We are a nationwide industry not without controversy. Whether it's visas for backstretch employees, or efforts to weaken HISA, or if this tax change should rear its ugly head again. We need our champions ready, able, and willing. In fact, we may need you sooner rather than later. One tax increase that did sneak into the bill, unbeknownst to the very powerful American Gaming Association, was a provision allowing only 90% deduction for gambling losses. This would actually create a scenario for gamblers where they would have to pay taxes on their losses. Legislation has already been introduced in both the House and Senate to restore 100% deductibility, and I am told that there's going to be a tax bill later this fall, and this fix will be included. I hope you will let the NTRA or me know if you have any particular relationship, and more importantly, willing to weigh in with policymakers on our behalf. Whether it's direct outreach or supporting the Jockey Club PAC or the NTRA PAC, your participation can really move the needle. This industry has many challenges on many fronts, but those issues are much more manageable if we can draw upon the many resources the industry has to address them. Finally, I just want to say to Stuart, I began working with the Jockey Club just as you became chairman, and I have to say that it was an honor to be in the foxhole with you on many of the issues that we fought down in Washington, and I really appreciate you taking a chance on me. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Sean. Our next speakers are Jon Stewart and Dr. Ryan Kelly of Fast Break AI.
My name is Jon Stewart. I am the CEO and one of the co-founders of Fast Break AI, along with Dr. Chris Grower and Dr. Tim Carnes. 3 years ago, my partners and I founded Fast Break AI to solve one of the most complex combinatorial problems in sports, optimizing schedules through the advanced machine learning and data science techniques. Today, our team includes 9 experts with PhDs in mathematics, operations research, particle physics, and data science, making us the deepest bench of sports scheduling specialists in the world. Fast Break AI is a sports technology, data science, and analytics provider for every level of sports, from professional to youth. Our clients include the NFL, NBA, NHL, MLB, MLS, and many other professional, collegiate, and elite youth travel tournaments around the world. About 3 months ago, we were approached by the Jockey Club to evaluate whether our expertise could be applied to horse race scheduling with the objective of increasing handle. Today, Dr. Ryan Kelly will present our team's findings to the members of this esteemed body. We believe our AI models reveal compelling opportunities to have a significant financial impact on horse racing through the development of a scheduling platform tailored to your industry's needs and facilitating cooperation amongst the racetracks. The primary focus of this study was to optimize post times to minimize overlap and maximize handle. However, we believe our expertise could also be utilized to improve race day scheduling, the sequence of races, and maybe even the scheduling of some of your most important events. Now, before I turn the presentation over to Ryan to discuss the feasibility study and our findings, I'd like to thank the Jockey Club Board of Stewards for the opportunity to study the problem and participate in your roundtable. We'd also like to thank all of you for your attention today. In particular, we'd like to thank Everett and Jim for engaging Fast Break, educating our team on your magnificent sport, and providing the guidance and data that made our work possible. And now, I will turn the presentation over to Ryan.
Thank you, John. So this has been a really fascinating project. We've been working on it now for about 3 months. And here at Fast Break, we have the expertise in scheduling software for sports, but you guys in this room are the experts on horse racing. You know, we don't know the field like you do, so we're going to rely on your expertise to help us build a better schedule. So the goal of this feasibility study was to capture the industry's intuition scientifically and fold that into building an optimized schedule to increase the handle. So here's what we did for this exercise, is we want to increase the handle. But there's different things that influence that handle, such as the track, the purse, the sequencing of races, things of that nature. But for this study, we focused on the thing that we could change in the data, which is the schedule itself. So we built a model to kind of estimate the influences using machine learning, and we folded that into the optimizer. And we executed this study with the 20 years of data that the Jockey Club provided. It's race-level data. And what we demonstrated is that with our models, we can predict a lift in total handle across all the tracks. So we tried to model this influence. So on the visualization on the right, you see a Gantt chart of 20 races from a random race day in 2022. So the vertical axis represents an individual race, and the horizontal axis represents time, and each marker is an individual race. So it becomes obvious when you view the data in this way that a lot of the races are run very close together or even overlap with each other. So what we wanted to do is kind of capture that characteristic scientifically. So in the visualization on the left, we kind of define what we mean. So the blue race, which is $1,200, is considered overlapping with these other two races because they start within X minutes of that given race. And X is a tunable parameter, so we actually set it for 5 minutes for this study. So in this case, it's going to be overlapped with the $500 race and the $1,000 race, giving us two races that overlap. The $700 race started a lot later, and therefore it's kind of standalone and it doesn't overlap with any other races. So what we did is we didn't just take the fraction, we actually weighted the fraction by the purse because the purse is kind of a proxy to the importance of the race. So when we do that, we create this variable that we called overlap, and we use it to, we fold it into the optimizer so that we can reduce the overlap to increase the intention on a given race. So continuing with this overlap concept, we plot it versus the average handle on a given race. And you can see that on the histogram on the right. And so the $1,200 race would have a higher overlap, so it would fall further right on the plot and thus have a lower handle. And the $700 race, which is standalone, would fall to the left of the plot and have a higher handle. So if we reduce the overlap, the main idea of this study is that the handle increases. So what we did is we built a multivariate nonlinear regression model to predict the handle. And some of the key features that went into this model are the track, the purse, the number of runners. The full list is right here on the slide. And one of the key features is overlap. And so this list of features is actually in order of importance to the model. Now notice overlap is not the most important feature. And the reason that is we didn't turn the knobs on any of those other features. We basically held those all fixed and we just turned the knob on overlap. And the reason we did that is we're trying to find kind of needle in a haystack. We're trying to squeeze out a little bit more handle. So even though it's not the most powerful feature, it's one that we can control in the schedule and that we can kind of tune. So on this visualization, we're showing a schedule on a particular day. And again, the markers represent races. The black markers are the original post times. And then we did our optimization where we tried to minimize the overlap, or didn't try, we actually minimized the overlap. And that represents the red markers. So you'll notice that the characteristics of the schedule didn't change very much. However, by optimizing the time, we were able to reduce the overlap for all these races by 20%. And when we ran it through the model, it showed that we predicted an increase in handle by 3% for this given day. So we basically did that same exercise over all of 2024. So again, we compared the prediction of the schedule before we ran the optimization and after. And what this shows is that we had an increase in the lift in total handle of 3%, which mapped to about $360 million, give or take. So this is a fairly significant increase in handle just from a simple tweak in the schedule, which is to reduce the overlap. Sorry. Now, a lot of consideration has already gone into the post times. It's already gone into the schedule. But things come up on race day. So in this toy example here on this slide, we see that to the left of the red line was the original post times and off times, post times being black, off times being blue. And on track D, we see a 25-minute delay for whatever reason. It could have been weather, it could have been some issue with the gate. And so in real time, and it only takes a few seconds, you can re-optimize the schedule. And so everything to the right shows in red the optimized schedule. And when we compare the prediction on the handle for the original off times versus the optimized time, we see an increase in handle, not just for track D, but also all the tracks. So this represents one of the main use cases is that we can keep the schedule optimum throughout a race day. And then in this scenario, this is our final scenario, is tracks are under no obligation to use this recommended schedule. So we did an exercise where we considered one high-profile track that abstained from using the schedule. So what this showed is even though in both cases there's a lift in handle, the lift is lower for when one track abstained. So what this demonstrates is that all tracks can be affected by when one or more tracks abstains from using the schedule. So on this slide, we have a mock-up of a platform. So this would be a real-time race scheduling platform. And it would provide an optimized schedule, and it would auto-ingest off time so that we could keep the schedule optimum throughout the day to react to transient events like I just showed on the previous slide. And it also provides a centralized view so that you can see what's going on across all the tracks simultaneously. So in this example, we have the race in red, which was delayed, and then all the other races after it in orange were moved later in time to keep the schedule optimal. So in summary, many races are overlapping, and this causes contention for eyeballs and thus lowers any potential handle. So if we optimize the schedule and reduce this overlap, this experiment shows that it should increase the handle. So here at FastBreak AI, we have the expertise to take this concept and fold it into an optimizer so that we can keep the handle maximum across all the tracks in the industry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John and Dr. Ryan. Please welcome our next speaker, Steve Kornacki, Chief Data Analyst for NBC News.
All right, thank you for that. And thank you for bringing me up here. As people have said, it's nice of me to come. I said, are you kidding? I get out of the office, I get to come to Saratoga in the middle of the summer. This is a pretty good deal for me. So it's exciting to be here. It's an honor to be here. I've enjoyed getting to meet some of you last night at the dinner, a little bit before the speeches today, and some of you I recognize I've had the pleasure of meeting long before this. So it's very good to be with you today. Enjoyed the presentations we've heard so far. I will say this: I work, as you may know, in politics, in elections. I'm Switzerland when it comes to that. I will back no candidates. I take no positions on issues. But I will say that when Sean was talking about that provision about the deductibility of gambling losses, I paid very close attention. I can say that. So, but the title of this presentation, you might have noticed in the program, is Elections and Handicapping: A Perspective on Both. So I was trying to think, what would be a good way of getting into that? And I thought maybe go back in time. So about a decade ago is where I want to take you, to the summer of 2016. This was actually going to be the week that the Republican National Convention that year was starting. You probably remember Donald Trump had just won the primaries. He's going to be nominated as the Republican candidate. And at that time, I was hosting 2 hours a day of live coverage. And one thing I've learned in television through the years is that no matter how much is going on in the world, 2 hours is a lot of time to fill. So I was always trying to think of what can we do that's unique or fresh or new, just something different to keep the eyeballs, watching and not going to another channel. So started thinking back then, what could we do that week? Trump's going to be nominated, no suspense, everybody knows the story. And that is when I got to thinking about the overlap that I think you all probably know something about between the terminology we often use to describe elections, political campaigns, and how we talk about horse racing. You know, we've got front runners, we've got favorites, we've got candidates jockeying for position. I could go on and on. So I said that week, what if we reimagined this Republican primary race that Donald Trump had just won, that everybody was talking about? What if we reimagined it as a horse race? And what if we got a world-class announcer to call it? And this is what happened.
Ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, here is Mr. Dave Johnson with the call.
Hello, racing fans, and welcome to Carnacki Downs and our coverage of the Republican Gold Cup. A field of 17 originally entered. We've had 4 late scratches. Take out Scott Walker, who was ahead in the early betting. Also scratched Jindal, Lindsey Graham, and Pataki. That leaves 13 contenders. The overwhelming favorite, number 3, Jeb, with that famous Bush breeding. They're all in line. And they're off. Jeb from the inside with the red cap goes for the lead. Rubio had a good start, as did Dr. Ben, but rushing up on the outside in the black cap, it's Trump. The one that very few thought had a chance is now going to the lead. Down the stretch they come. Trump is in front. Cruz with one last burst of speed, passing Kasich, but he can't get to the leader. In deep stretch, it's Trump going easily. He has it won. Cruz going to be second, Kasich third. What a race! What a battle! We've never seen anything like it. Trump wins the Republican Gold Cup.
So that was new. Thank you. Thank you. That was new, that was different, that was fun. And I don't think I need to tell anybody here, but I want to make sure to give credit there. That was Dave Johnson, and not only giving that call, obviously, but that was Dave who found that particular race that matched up, the dynamics matched up so closely to that Republican primary race. So, look, it was mission accomplished just from the standpoint of doing something different, but that segment also was deeper to me in terms of what it meant. I say that because, as you might know, I'm a horse racing fan. I've always been a horse racing fan. I'm also a huge fan of Dave Johnson. His calls played no small role in drawing me into this sport way back in the first place as a kid. Tempo, drama, urgency. I think if you've watched him through the years, you know he elevated the experience of watching a race. The first Kentucky Derby that I can remember was 1987. Ali Sheba running down Bet Twice. Anyone remember that? I can still hear Dave's call. Standing here right now, I could still tell you where I was. I could put myself back in that moment of watching that race. And if you had told me back then that all those years later I'd get to team up with Dave for something like that, I don't think I would have believed it. But I think in that way I've been very lucky. I've been very fortunate. I've made most of my career in politics and elections. I've enjoyed it. But through that work and everything that's come with it, I've gotten to meet so many people who are involved in this sport in so many different ways. And it's given me an avenue into this sport in so many different ways. Obviously, a bettor, a viewer. I've also been able to do it now as a broadcaster, even as a part owner. I see Terry Finley there, a West Point partner. You're getting overwhelmed with West Point partners here. I know Griffin Johnson's coming later, so big day for West Point here. But that's been an exciting thing for me through the years. Like with so many others, how did I get into the sport in the first place? It was through a relative. In my case, it was my Uncle Joe. And I think everybody knows an Uncle Joe-like character in their lives. He's a larger-than-life figure, hands out nicknames to everybody. Sharky, Shaky, the Commissioner. These are characters that I was exposed to at a dangerously formative stage in my life. Thanks to my Uncle Joe. He's just a magnet for Damon Runyon characters. He loves the action of the track. He owns a beach store, still does, did when I was a kid, in southern Maine. And Friday nights, he'd slip out and go where? Scarborough Downs, unfortunately, the late lamented Scarborough Downs. He took me there for the first time when I was 6 years old. And my uncle Now, I like to think I've become a much more sophisticated handicapper as I've gone along. I think we got the sound coming back here. A much more sophisticated handicapper, but the muscle memory is still there. If I go out to Saratoga today and I open up that program, I will invariably circle the 13s. And actually, a friend of mine, I was telling him about the system once, and he got interested just in how unscientific it was. So he did a study. And he took one of the big tracks, and he looked at a period of 1 year. And he said, if you had bet every horse over that period of time who was a 13, the ROI would have been, well, it would have been massively negative. But when I took that information to my Uncle Joe, he scoffed and he said, sample's too small. So I think the jury is still out on the 13 system. My uncle may have been joking about trying to teach me math through horse racing, but I think there's actually some truth to that. My mind works pretty well with numbers. In many ways, it's how I've learned to make sense of the world. I learned at a young age that if I can put a number on something and can compare it to something else, then I can understand it. So when I opened up that program at Scarborough Downs, it was a pretty natural outlet for that. I found other outlets too as I grew up. The one that's ended up shaping so much of my life and my career, of course, it has involved politics and more specifically elections. And there's a lot of overlap between my interest in elections and my interest in horse racing. In each case, there's a tantalizing puzzle. Here's a field of candidates. Here's a field of horses. Who should win? Who can win? Who can't win? Who might have a better chance of winning than anyone seems to realize? And in horse racing, it doesn't matter if it's a stakes race or if it's a non-winners of 2 lifetime race out at Canterbury Park. And I love Canterbury Park, by the way. The puzzle is there. The challenge is there. It's the same in politics and elections. It could be the presidential race. It could be a contest for city council somewhere. Give me a set of candidates. Give me a field of horses. I want to understand what the relevant metrics are, and I want to make sense of the race. And just like in horse racing, when it comes to elections, there is no shortage of metrics that you could use to try to understand a campaign: polling, fundraising, ad expenditures, endorsement tallies, each candidate's track record in past elections. Of course, the metrics can be deceptive. You can be led astray. The old Mark Twain line comes to mind about how there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. But the horse racing political campaign also come with the satisfying promise of finality. After all the predictions from all the players about what is going to happen, what the outcome will be, and why, we're going to find out. There will be an answer. We will learn who was right, and we will learn who was wrong. Now, there are some critics in my profession who might roll their eyes at some of what I'm saying right now, because I'm talking about politics and political campaigns as a competition. And the criticism that they would have, the term they use for this, you might have heard it, is horse race journalism. And it's meant to be pejorative. The idea is that covering a campaign from the standpoint of who's winning and who's losing shortchanges weightier, substantive, more important matters and trivializes the process. Now, I have literally spent the last few minutes making a comparison between political campaigns and horse racing. So if they're accusing me of practicing horse race journalism, I'm probably not in a good position to deny it. But that's okay, because honestly, I embrace the term. And I actually think there is some value in what I do. And I say this because there are 2 trends that have massively accelerated over the course of my career covering politics and elections. I'm sure it's something you see in your own lives. I know it's something I've seen in my own life, and that is that people who barely followed politics not that long ago are now into it to a level I never could have imagined. And not only that, they've picked sides. They're team red or they're team blue. You could call this polarization, you could call this tribalism, whatever you want. But what it means for what I do is that most people, more people than ever in fact, are deeply invested in the outcome of elections. They want to understand the dynamics of a campaign because they want to make sure their side wins, or they want to make sure the other side loses. And I think this puts me in a position that I feel lucky to occupy, because amidst all of the polarization and all of those deep divides that are out there, I get to talk to both sides, because I am talking about one of the few areas where there actually is common ground between them. They both want to know who's up, who's down, and why, and so do I. So I'm happy to call myself a horse race journalist. And as I mentioned at the beginning, it's through my career as a horse race journalist that I've actually gotten to experience the sport of horse racing in ways I could never have dreamed of when I was a kid. Just after the 2020 election, the folks at NBC Sports called and they asked me if I'd take part in Sunday Night Football, looking at the playoff chase using a probability model to break it down. Now, I'm a huge football fan. This was like an unbelievable moment to get that call, thrilling thing to get to do. And fortunately, they thought it went well enough that when the season was over, they came back to me and they said, are there any other sports that we broadcast that you might be interested in? And I thought about that for a second, and I think you know what answer I might have given the folks at NBC Sports. And so it was that on the first Saturday of May of 2021, I got to check off a bucket list item. It was the first time that I ever got to go to the Kentucky Derby in person, which was a thrill in and of itself. And I also got to be part of the broadcast team for that event, an event that I had consumed as a viewer every year since that first race with Ali Sheba back in 1987. Now, on that day, NBC stationed me in front of a giant interactive touchscreen. There were some betting windows right behind us. I could walk 10 steps between segments and make all of my bets. Are you kidding me? And I got to share the area with Eddie Olczyk. He's one of the on-air handicappers for NBC Sports. And I'll never forget standing there. It was actually the day before for the Oaks. You may remember the race. Malathat, search results, neck and neck to the wire. Of course, I had neither one of them, so I'm tearing up my tickets afterwards. And Edzo comes over to me and he shows me his $500 straight exacta. That was an impressive thing to see. And talk about a perk. Between Edzo and NBC's other handicapper, Matt Bernier, I've had the opportunity to be right there on racing's biggest days with two pros, to quiz them about their method, how they're thinking about each race, how they're structuring their bets, and most importantly to me, what they think about how I'm looking at the race. Now, as I said, I consider this a perk of the job. I think if you ask Edzo or Matt Bernier about having to deal with me asking all of these questions as they're going about their work on a huge day, they might have another term for it, but they've been unfailingly polite to me. It's been great to work with. The whole team has been. So anyway, when it came to the Derby that year in 2021, I think you know how it goes for NBC. Before the race goes off, everybody makes a prediction. It's all meant to be in good fun. They even throw some celebrities in there every now and then. But I have to tell you, I felt enormous pressure because I was the new guy. And I was very aware that the horse racing audience either had no idea who I was or they knew me only as that guy who gets weirdly excited about elections on television. So I really wanted to pick the winner. And more than that, I really, really didn't want to pick a horse that finished up the track. So I thought about it. Should I just take one of the favorites? That way, if I'm wrong, I'm hardly alone. But I didn't like the favorites in that race. And I did have this kind of weird gut feeling about a 12-1 shot who I thought would get to the lead, and I thought maybe could just stay there through the whole race. So I agonized over this. I know it may sound ridiculous, but I thought this was such an important moment, at least back then. And it is how my first on-air pick for NBC Sports ended up being Medina Spirit in the 2021 Derby. And all I will say about that right now is they are not getting the money back. Now, whether it was because of that or in spite of it, NBC has kept me as part of its team since then. Now, mainly, my job is to use that giant touchscreen to highlight various statistical angles, to tell historical stories. But this spring, I had the chance to do something different and, for me, very special. I've talked about being interested in horse racing from the standpoint of stats and wagering, but I swear to you, I am not that bloodless of a person. I'm also a sucker for tradition, for pageantry, for characters, for underdog stories. And horse racing is a sport that is chock full of all of these. And my all-time favorite character in this sport or any is D. Wayne Lucas, the late D. Wayne Lucas. When I first discovered horse racing, he was the king. This was the mid-1990s. Every year growing up, he'd have that suit, he'd have those shades, he'd have that swagger, and I'd look up whatever Triple Crown race it was, and there he was. He always seemed to be in the winner's circle, and he always seemed to be saying, hey, I got these 2-year-olds who are going to be even better next year for me. So he was the king back then, and I know you know all of his accomplishments and all of his accolades, so I won't get into that right here, but I will tell you that what I admired about him, what I loved about him was that he never quit. Through his 70s and through his 80s, he still got up every single morning at ungodly hours. He worked his horses, he scrambled for clients, he adamantly refused to downsize his dreams. For so long, it was like he was waging a war against time and somehow winning it. My devotion to D. Wayne was well known to the folks at NBC Sports, and in April, I got a phone call from Lindsay Shanzer. She's the producer of our coverage. She told me to get on a flight to Louisville. I was going to spend the morning with Lucas at his barn. We were going to put a piece together. We'd run it during this year's Derby coverage. Now, it has been said that you should never meet your heroes because they'll only disappoint you. I can tell you that for me, this is absolutely not the case. I got to the barn that day at 3:45 in the morning, and sure enough, 15 minutes later, there he was driving in his pickup truck, 89-year-old D. Wayne Lucas. He was generous with his time that morning. He was expansive in his thoughts. There were funny anecdotes, pearls of wisdom, was genuine insight into human nature. And these ended up being some of the final public words he would offer about his life, about his career, and about his legacy. I don't know if you saw the piece when it aired on NBC during the Derby, but the team did an incredible job, I think, putting it together. I feel like we created a worthy tribute to a legend. And I'll say that no matter what else I do in television, whether it's horse racing, elections, or anything else, I doubt I will ever be part of something so satisfying. And I keep this in mind when I think about the question that I know this entire industry is grappling with, and that is the future of the sport. How to attract new people into it, how to build a sport, how to grow the sport. And I could talk about betting, and I could give you my list of 12 things I'd love to see there, but I won't, because when I think of this bigger, broader question, it's the Lucas side of the game that I think about. For me, this is much more than a gambling product. When I watched Wayne Lucas win the Preakness last year with Seize the Gray, I didn't have a cent bet on that horse. And yet there I was, as they turned for home, screaming my heart out for Seize the Gray to hold on. And when he did, just jumping with joy. I don't think I've ever made a winning bet that felt as good and that felt as rewarding as a fan seeing Lucas walk his way to the winner's circle in Baltimore last year. I'm also far from the only one who develops an attachment to the horses themselves. Do you remember a horse named Whitmore? He won the Breeders' Cup Sprint a few years ago when he was 7. Larry Colmus called him the old man as he crossed the finish line. He was honest. He always showed up. He always came with a furious late charge. I loved Whitmore. His final race ended up being up here at Saratoga a few summers ago. Now, I'm going to get in a little bit of trouble if some folks I know are watching this, but I can tell you that when that race went off, I was actually in a wedding, in a church. And I couldn't get the video on my phone and sneak a peek at it, but what I could do was I could check Twitter. I could take a little glance at Twitter. So I was doing that, trying to get updates as the race went off. And in the middle of the service, I almost gasped when I saw the update because Whitmore was injured. Whitmore was vanned off, and nobody knew what his condition was. And I sat there for the rest of the service. I felt stricken. It was a horrible, horrible thing to see and to not know. Now, we got out, news came out, Whitmore was fine. He was going to be retired, but he was fine. The relief I experienced, it was deep, it was profound, and it was joyful. And those are not the emotions that you would just have if horse racing were only a gambling product. A term that gets used a lot during our coverage on NBC for horse racing is sense of place. It's a real point of emphasis in what we do. The idea is to try to capture what it feels like to be there at the Kentucky Derby or at the Breeders' Cup or at Royal Ascot or wherever it may be. The experience obviously is an amazing one. And when I'm talking to people who aren't horse racing fans, it's not just betting that I'm talking to them about, it's this. This is what I'm trying to convey to them, a sense of place. And not only when it comes to the grand venues like Churchill on the first Saturday in May. I don't need to tell folks in this room, there are tracks all over this country that still get a crowd, that still have energy, where the tradition runs deep, where there is a great day to be had. I live in New York. I'm always telling folks, take the family to Monmouth, have a picnic, give the kids $20, bet on the races, see the horses in the paddock. I know snowbirds who head down to the Gulf Coast every winter, and I'm always telling them, take a drive over to Tampa Bay Downs, sit outside, watch the races, bask in the warm air, take in that lush green grass, remind yourself, oh my gosh, It's the middle of January, and this is where I am. I talk up tracks all over the country that I've been to, that I want to go to. I talk about Oaklawn. I talk about Santa Anita on Boxing Day, Del Mar in the summer. I talk about the smaller tracks, too. Get to Fairmount Park on a Saturday night. I'm always telling people, go out and see it, because I think that is the best advertisement there is for this sport, is to take somebody who is not a horse racing fan and who perhaps has all the wrong ideas about what this sport is all about, and to get them out to the track and to have them walk away and saying that was a great experience. So that's what I would like to leave you with, to urge all of us to think about how we can make that experience more available in more ways, at more tracks, more frequently. And I will close back with my Uncle Joe, why not, with a line he likes to use. This is a corny one, and I'm sure he got it from somebody else, so maybe you heard it before. But my Uncle Joe will ask me, he'll say, what is the best day in the world? And I'll say, what? And he says, it is a winning day at the track. And he says, now what is the second best day in the world? I say, well, I don't know. What is it? It's a losing day at the track, because you're at the track. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. Before we go to intermission, please watch this short video on stable recovery.
So you were at the point that Frank Taylor describes as the, you had the gift of desperation.
Absolutely.
Is that true? What, describe that for me.
You're basically living to drink alcohol and use drugs, and your life has no other value to it besides that, really.
Our reproductive vet, he's gonna come in and he's gonna palp a mare, and he's gonna check her ovaries and see where she is at as far as breeding-wise goes.
Slow down, there's a hand to hold.
And in that moment when you shared the mare looking at you in the stall, can you take me back to that moment for you and what was going through your mind when you felt that?
Just an overwhelming feeling of peace. Yeah.
When you think about where you started when you first got here, what you were feeling, what you were going through, and now to this point where you are, the accomplishments that you've made, what does that make you think?
Gratitude. And you know, there's a laundry list of people I have nothing but just gratitude for, because now I have found just a little success in this industry, and you know, I'm able to provide a beautiful home for my family. They're able to come up in a beautiful horse country, you know, just gratitude.
I know that we shouldn't waste another day. Right for the sunset, lighting the fire on a blade.
Coming up next, we have an interview with Griffin Johnson, influencer, creator, and new horse owner, moderated by Shannon Kelly, Director of Industry Relations for the Jockey Club.
Hello. Welcome to the story behind racing's most influential marketing campaign and interview with Griffin Johnson. Griffin, welcome. Let's jump right into it. To many in this room, you are known as the influencer, and you're hard to miss. But there may be some in the room who don't know you yet. You've built a powerful personal brand across multiple platforms and industries. Walk us through your journey. How did Griffin Johnson become Griffin Johnson, and what is an influencer?
It's a great question, right? it's funny because horse racing, it's the first time I've been actually called the influencer, so that's been fun. But you know, when you break it down, what really is an influencer and what has made this so successful? And what it really breaks down to is authenticity. And you'll hear me talk about it a lot. I love to talk about being authentic. And I think that with Sandman, you know, whenever I came in, you know, Terry, and I actually got into it through his daughter-in-law, Allie. And they connected me with ABR, and they're like, we have this magnificent horse. Mind you, I grew up in the Midwest. I'd been around every livestock and every horse, anything you can think of, I had been around it. I actually worked on a hog farm for many years, not as, you know, luxurious as horses, we'll say. And, you know, whenever they brought Sandman to me, there was something about him that captivated me. And I think everyone here has a story with a horse that they can relate to in the same way. And, you know, it all started, I actually got into his journey a few weeks after they had got him from the sale. And it was just little touches here and there to Gen Z, right? And just showing them that I had this magnificent, stunning gray horse running around the track. And obviously it progressed, and once we won the Arkansas Derby, it showed me that this is what I wanted to do. And I said this last night at the dinner. It was the first time in my life that I had felt like I had done something bigger than myself. So that led me to the Kentucky Derby. I said, look, I'm gonna put my entire heart into this. This is what I wanna do. And, you know, that's why we're here today, so.
Well, I think we should roll the tape so the audience can see all about that journey.
What is up, ABR team? This is Griffin Johnson here. Today we're at Churchill Downs. It is Sandman's very first race. You might be wondering, how did I get here? There's actually an amazing program called Stake in Stardom, which is basically for people of influence to actually get a stake in horses and promote horse racing itself.
Sandman in front by 2, Publisher is second, and Sandman, he's run his A race, and he gets a confidence booster, heading to Kentucky. Oh my gosh! We're going to the Derby! We're going to the Derby! We're going to the Kentucky Derby! Let's go!
This is probably the most prestigious thing you can do in horse racing.
How and why did you get involved with the ownership of Sandman?
I had a mutual friend, and they connected me with America's Best Racing.
My favorite thing about Sandman is how great of a horse he is.
Come on, Johnny! Come on!
Just to be here for my first year, obviously super blessed. Sandman is just a one-of-one horse. I think the entire crowd on social media can agree with that, and I'm just glad to be here, and I'm enjoying every step of the way.
I felt the excitement in that. I know you were excited. Obviously, you've enjoyed this ride with Sandman, so let's talk about the numbers, some of which we saw on the screen. There were residual effects of your involvement in racing leading up to the Kentucky Derby. We saw the highest TV ratings for the Derby since 1989. Wagering was up, and America's Best Racing, who we saw that produced this video and who you worked with, saw a 500% increase in video views year over year. So can you tell us a little bit about what made this campaign so successful and really special? Why did your audience connect with this story?
Yeah, you know, once again, it comes down to authenticity. And I think the biggest thing, when you see all these numbers on the board, you know, for someone that's never looked into social media, what does it mean, right? Everyone sitting here is probably thinking, well, that's great. 212 million people is a lot, but what does that mean for horse racing? And aside from being, you know, global now, this is, when you say 212 million, we're talking about people all over the world. And really what it breaks down to, these numbers are a whole new audience and a whole new demographic that is being brought to a sport that has been seen as very traditional and almost like a club. It's kind of like hard to get in unless you've been, you know, brought up with a family that's in it or been introduced by another friend or a family member. And, you know, for me in this journey, I grew up with nothing, right? I'm a kid, I have nobody in horse racing. I've never been to a race growing up, and this is my first introduction. So I think what people have really gravitated towards is they finally feel like they have someone that knows nothing about racing, which I'll say it right now. I have a lot to learn. I mess up a lot, and I just take it with grace. And I think for the newcomers, a lot of them feel like, oh, well, I can just go along with Griffin, and he doesn't always know what he's talking about either. And that is the beauty of what this campaign has been, is giving people the first insight to the backside. And I'm there every morning at 5:30 showing off the Cassie barn and Sandman, and now we have, we're working on next year, and just bringing it all together and really showing people what goes in and making them feel like they're an owner.
That's great. And I think it's that behind the scenes view. We talk about the backside, and if you're in horse racing, you know what that is. But to those who are new, they don't know what that is, and you're showing putting in the feed in the buckets and rolling bandages. And have you been mucking stalls yet? I'm not too sure.
Lightly.
Lightly. So you mentioned in the beginning that your audience is largely Gen Z. I assume you, before coming into racing, and many of them saw our sport as something of the past for an older generation. Now that we've gotten them interested, how do we transition these views, these clicks, these fans into long-term fans and participants?
Yeah, this is, just being here today, thank you all for coming. This is exactly the things that are gonna bring people, two generations, we'll call it, and collide them in the middle, right? Because I think for Gen Z, they see me as a spokesperson because I've been able to get in these rooms and talk to these people, and we don't always get that sort of respect in most industries, right? And I think that the beautiful thing about what's going on here today with the Jockey Club and having everyone, kind of mesh in the middle is that this is the first time that we've ever been heard, really. I mean, there's no other industry I've ever been in where there's so many, powerful people in one room that are willing to listen to a bunch of kids. And I think that is very authentic to who this audience is and who we are today as horsemen. I've heard a million stories from, how people are getting in and how people have a passion for this game. And it's just taking that and showing it to the kids now. It's how do we show them that they can get in? How do we show the path of entry to get into this sport for someone that maybe hasn't ever grown up with anything or has no previous knowledge? And, more than ever now, I think that horse racing, everyone's listening to what the audience wants, whether it's, aftercare, whether it's safety, whether it's just showing up to the tracks and showing the officials and showing off the personality of the people that are spending their life making this happen every single day. So that really, when you break it down, right, is I've asked everyone, what got you into horse racing, right? And I could ask anyone in the crowd, what got you here? And when you break it down, it's all about experience. Showing people the experience, taking people to the track and showing them what it's all about. And all boats rise as we continue to work on all of the issues moving forward. I can't even say how excited I am, but it really is, I think, turning of a new leaf.
Yeah, and I think it's, like you're mentioning, it's telling a story. It's not just a sport that you're watching those 2 minutes. You're promoting an entire experience, the lifestyle, the different points of entry, right? So it's not just wagering, it's buying a ticket, getting dressed up. A lot of that is seen on social media every day with these get ready with me's, let me show you about my day. It's a peek into your world, and now you're bringing horse racing into that world.
Yeah, exactly. And for everyone in the crowd today, look, I understand. If I had done something and social media came into my life, or there was something new aside from social media, I built my entire life, my entire business, everything that I know is on social media. And I understand if you've already been doing something successful for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, more, generational for a lot of the people here today, it's very hard to adopt something new, right? Whenever you've already created such a great life for yourself. But I just want everyone to know that when you think of social media, it's just a tool. It's a marketing tool. It's the new generation and how they're absorbing content. The same thing when TV came on and you got radio. Now radio is podcasting, and now TV is just YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. It's really just the same thing in a new form, and it's a little bit faster. It's a little bit fresher, and it's just the way that the world is always adapting. So, how do you take that? Once again, how do you take all of these numbers and bring it into your life? And whatever it is, whether it's West Point, whether it's ABR, whether it's a feed company, whether it's, no matter what it is, right? When you break it down, you're gonna give people an experience of what you're doing, no matter what it is. And as long as we're able to leverage that, the beauty of it is I'm just a kid with an iPhone, and somehow I landed myself here. And that is the perfect example of why it's so great, because I pull out my phone, whatever an iPhone costs, I press the red button to record, and when I'm finished, that's it. There's no production. I don't have to answer to anyone when I can post it. I just put it together, and boom, 15 million people can access my content at the tap of my finger at any point. And we can do that for the entire sport. That's where we're moving.
Yeah, well, I think you touched on it a little bit, but I think it's important to touch upon what the industry as a collective has already done, credit where credit is due. We're heavily focused on horse and rider safety, aftercare, and finding second careers for our horses after they've finished racing. We've committed to fairness and structure with the implementation of HISA. Between Fox Sports, NBC, and FanDuel, we've expanded TV coverage and promoted our big Ds. And horse racing has had influencers and celebrities involved in the past. So what makes what you do different, and how can influencer marketing support live racing?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, you know, throughout time, I've always been fighting. As an influencer, you're always fighting credibility, right? Because once again, the people that control a lot of the business and are the powerful people in the world didn't understand what it was or how to use it or how to leverage it. So, you know, I've always been going through my life trying to get that mainstream media coverage. And the reason why is because with celebrities, right, if you're talking about athletes, if you're talking about musicians or, movie stars, whatever it may be, it's almost like they're on a pedestal in a way, right? You can't access them. And if you can access them, you're one of very few. And I think that what we've seen in the past is Tom Brady's the GOAT. It's awesome that he's at the Kentucky Derby, but for a viewer, what does that mean, right? Like, they can't talk to Tom Brady. They're not going to get to shake his hand or take a picture or, just even get close to him, right? He's going to have a special line. He's going to walk through the back, and he's just going to be in his own bubble. And I think that for me, I show up to Saratoga. We show up, we'll be there this weekend for the Whitney, and you'll see I'll be taking pictures with people. I'm introducing myself. I'm asking, did you bet today? How was it? Oh, you lost money? Hey, me too, but that's cool. And that's really what it breaks down to, is the reason that an influencer is so powerful is because it's accessible. And that's what gets people to show up, right? And if you feel like you can come say, hey, and it's like, maybe you get to see Sandman or you get to see me or whatever, it's an experience. And once again, you always hear me break it down to that.
And I think it means that we've created a new type of celebrity. An influencer has become a type of celebrity to that audience, but one that is way more approachable than your traditional celebrity. So it gets people involved at a lower level.
Yeah, 1,000%. It all comes down to, once again, they feel like you're more likely to come to something if you feel like you can get an experience and get to actually meet someone.
Right. So what's next, Griffin? People in the industry might assume that people your age only care about instant gratification, but I'm pretty sure you're here to stay. In the video we saw earlier, we saw a sequence where we saw the logos of NYRA, Breeders' Cup, Keeneland, and we know that within partnership with these organizations and with the support of the Jockey Club, you've started a new campaign. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm actually really excited about that. And look, maybe it has happened, but I'm just going to keep it in my head for my own ego. This is one of the first time that we've had a lot of tracks come together and do something. So, thank you to the Jockey Club, thank you to Keeneland, thank you to the Breeders' Cup, and thank you to NYRA for putting that together. But really what that means is we're all working together for the same goal. How do we get a younger audience, and how do we create longevity for this amazing sport? I know that horse racing's already done an excellent job of that, but we really need to captivate these kids. So, what we're really breaking down is from a betting side, right? How do you educate people enough to where they feel like they bet? The biggest reason why Gen Z hasn't bet, and the reason that Sandman has been able to get them to bet, is not about money. When you break it down and you ask them, none of them say it's to make money. What it is, they finally feel like they know a horse. They've been educated about his entire process from the day I got him. You can look it up. From the day I got him to now, you can see all of his training. You can see every race. You can see a breakdown and just get really like an insight of who he is as an animal with his personality and everything that goes into it. So what we're going to do is, and what I hope to do is through this content over this campaign over the next 4 months, is really educate them about what else there is to offer. So, you know, in October, I'm going to go to the Keeneland sale and like show them, you know, what goes into it. I'm going to go to the backstretch once again at another track, show them what goes on at Del Mar. And you just keep doing that over and over and over. It's not a 1-year plan. It's not a 2-year plan. You know, in my head, this is a 10 to 20-year plan at least. And to the second part of that, I think a lot of people worry about investing in me because they don't know if I'm going to stick around. And so I thought about that a lot. And I talked to Terry Finley at West Point, and I'm like, look, it might cost you a little money, but look, we really need to get a couple, you know, we need to make this a 2, 3, 4, 5-year plan. So, you know, it hasn't really been announced, but, you know, we're coming in. We got a horse running this weekend, Ewing, and the Saratoga Special that I just came on board of. So that's going to be really exciting. I think a lot of people around here already know him. He had a really nice debut, and we've had fun with that. And we're also looking at not only doing one, but doubling down for another. We have Curtain Call, who also just ran a really nice race here. He just broke his maiden. So for me, you know, my vision of this sport is how do we make horse racing one of the most watched sports in America? And that's going to be my relentless goal for the foreseeable future. I think that it's going to be a 5-year thing. I think that in 5 years, we're going to see a huge shift of Gen Z watching horse racing. But this is what I plan on doing for as long as I can, as long as I can do it.
So I think it's safe to say that the influencer is in it for the long haul, and maybe in 5 years you will just be introduced as Griffin Johnson, not the influencer.
I love that. Yes, that is the goal. And thank you guys all so much for coming here. Really, I mean, I was saying this before, if you put this entire room together, I think that we could just about accomplish or buy anything we want. And just as you walk away from this, just know that the biggest thing about social media is that, you know, you can, if we came together, we could buy whatever, but what you can't get is time. And with social media, it is a time saver, and if you utilize it correctly, people will not only gravitate to it, but they will respect you, and they will feel like they are a part of whatever you're building, and I think that's a really special thing.
Thank you so much, Griffin. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Griffin and Shannon. Now, a discussion with Dr. Alan Hershkowitz of the New York Yankees and Glenn Kozak of the New York Racing Association, moderated by President and COO of the Jockey Club, James Gagliano.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. Our closing panel of the day is going to examine trends, statistics, challenges, and potential solutions related to how weather is affecting our respective industries. And to begin, we're going to take a look at some information from Equibase tracking weather-related cancellations, race cancellations, from 2015 through 2024. Let's get started. Over the 10-year period, total race days declined by 24%, yet the number of weather-related cancellations increased by nearly 25%. The average number of cancellations rose from 68.5 per year between 15 and 18 to 85.5 per year from 2021 to 2024. The highest year on record was 2023 with 103 cancellations. Summer months saw the most significant change, no surprise. From an average of 7.5 summer cancellations between 2015 and 2018, the number increased to almost 30 per summer in the 2021 to 24 period, an increase of nearly 300%. Notable spikes included 29 cancellations in June of 23 due to the heat dome, and additional heat-related disruptions in July and August of last summer. Winter weather also remains a major factor as well. February 2021 recorded 41 cancellations. February 2015 had 32, and January of 24 saw 27. So to dive into this topic, I thank my fellow panelists. We have Glenn Kozak, Executive Vice President of Operations and Capital Projects for NYRA. Glenn oversees facility and track operations at Belmont, Saratoga, and Aqueduct. including all 14 racing surfaces and the fleet equipment. He also leads the company's annual capital improvement projects. Before joining NYRA in 2008, Glenn and I worked together at the Maryland Jockey Club, where he was Vice President of Facilities and Racing Surfaces. Additionally, we're very lucky to have Dr. Alan Herskowitz join us. Alan is the Environmental Science Advisor to the New York Yankees and serves as the official sustainability advisor to the NBA, Major League Soccer, the Los Angeles Clippers, the Pittsburgh Pirates, and Playhouse Square. He also serves as the environmental advisor to Royal Albert Hall and to the United States Tennis Association. Since we're here in Saratoga, let's start with Glenn. On the turf today or off?
Off the turf.
Okay.
Off the turf, unfortunately.
Late breaking news. We're going to ask Glenn to take us through some slides that he's prepared to give you a peek into what's going on at the new Belmont Park and some of the resiliency and programs they've put in to deal with weather-related issues. Glenn,
Thank you, Jim. So as Jim pointed out, with what we've seen throughout the last 10 years, weather has impacted not only summer, winter. So data collection has been incredibly important for us throughout the industry. So working with not only the Racing Surface Testing Lab, but also our own data collection for, just as Jim pointed out, off the turf today, we've already had 0.4 of an inch of rain. We've got 3 weather stations that we capture data. But what's changed is now it's not just capturing moisture, it's not just capturing temperature, wind speed. Now in the summer months, we've all been exposed to not only the heat index with how it impacts racing, but also air quality testing. Who would ever think that we'd have to go through something like that, where at Belmont Park prior to a day before the Belmont canceling a day of racing because of air quality. So there has been significant impact on how weather has affected racing. So data collection with the decisions that we make for not only the turf racing, but also our scheduling, play a key part to that. That data collection, as I mentioned, with Caleb Dempsey from Racing Surface Testing Lab, designing information and equipment that is able to provide that real-time data for us. So this is just Saratoga with the data collected for what the moisture content is in the track, what the cushion depth is, and also the resistance with a penetrometer. So again, technology has evolved with this, but more importantly for this panel is what we're doing to capture some of this efficiencies with sustainability. So with the new Belmont Park, there's been an extensive use of reclaimed water, and Jim, we can go into that when we get a little bit further along.
Great. Alan, first I'd like to share a short clip from a NewsHour video that's available on YouTube that featured you. Could roll the tape, please.
Every professional sports community in the United States is being affected by climate change.
Alan Herskowitz is the Environmental Science and Sustainability Advisor for the New York Yankees, the first environmental scientist hired by a pro team across all sports. At his urging, the Yankees became the first North American pro team to sign a United Nations pledge to bring down greenhouse gas emissions, because, he says, the stakes are too high.
So there is an urgency because guess what? Children are not going to be able to play baseball outside. People are not going to be able to play tennis outside. Something's got to give.
The last 10 years have been the warmest ever recorded. It's pushed the globe into new and uncharted territory, and it's pushing sports to its limits.
Alan, how have you helped the Yankees integrate environmental-related considerations into their operations, both on the field and also with the stadium, the operations, and the infrastructure that they've built?
Yeah. Thanks for the question, and first of all, thanks to the Jockey Club for hosting this conversation. I've been here for the first couple of days, and I haven't heard the words climate change, and I've been hearing about schedules and cancellations and, predicting schedules and how to, address cancellations. And of course, as you indicated with your data, The primary cause of cancellation, which in the last 5 years in summer months have gone up 300%, is weather-related impacts. There is no professional sporting venue in the United States, in the world, that is not being affected by climate disruption, whether it's heavy rains and floods, whether it's excessive heat. Right now, heat-related deaths is the #1 weather-related death in the United States. The Yankees actually, first of all, the leadership, you don't get to be one of the most prominent and successful sports organizations in the world because you're stupid. These folks are actually incredibly smart. They pay attention to science. Science is not just another opinion. Science is not a political opinion. They get it. And actually, back in 2005, I was invited to join with Major League Baseball Commissioner Bud Selig. And for 2 years, he and his staff and my staff, I was a scientist at an environmental research organization, we created the Commissioner's Initiative on Sustainable Ballpark Operations. That research work, which designed information for every single baseball team, location specific, the analysis began in 2005, and the information was distributed to all teams in 2007. Well, Yankee Stadium's new stadium, which opened in 2009, was being developed and designed just as the Commissioner's office was actually putting together new guidelines for development and operations from the perspective of sustainability. So the Yankees benefited from that Major League Baseball momentum as it concerned the design of the new stadium. You know, remember, an organization is the shadow of its leadership. And if you've got, Bud Selig and Hal Steinbrenner and Randy Levine and Doug Behar all behind this, you're going to get something spectacular. Also, believe it or not, the Yankees benefited enormously from New York's very progressive environmental regulatory infrastructure. The Yankees are subject to more environmental regulations than any sport team, arguably in the world, but certainly in North America. They've got New York City Local Law 84, 97, state laws and federal laws. And these regulations are designed to make the venue more efficient and more resilient. The way regulations come together, as you all know, is you get folks from industry, you get folks from the science community, you get folks from government. They come up and they don't do best practices because there's always going to be some kind of compromise related to economics and operation, but they identify better practices. So Local Law 97, for example, obligated the Yankees to have to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions from 2019 to 2025 by 40%. The Yankees had to undertake very careful measurement and granular analysis of, literally, the gasoline we use in our lawn care equipment. Everything was evaluated, and we have achieved that 40% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions for the stadium that complies with Local Law 97. Well, guess what? Local Law 97 now says they've got to do another 80% by 2030. And these numbers come from science. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has basically put together progress that businesses need to make with regards to climate greenhouse gas reductions by certain dates in order for us to not tip over into irreversible impacts. But as we already know, irreversible impacts are already happening, and literally people are dying. But everything from there's now space at Yankee Stadium for heat stress. When fans are stressed from heat, they now have a place to go and cool out. The Yankees have been installing literally dozens and dozens and dozens, and I mean more than 3 dozens, of water refilling stations. And they are now popularizing the use of refillable bottles. The Intuit Dome, by the way, which I've worked on in the LA Clippers, Steve Ballmer, the owner, has 280 water hydration stations. And again, as you notice, and I'll vary a little bit off from the Yankees, although, look, the Yankees just recently, and this hasn't been publicly announced, I don't know that we need to publicly announce it, but I'm an advisor to MIT's Sports Lab and MIT's Climate Machine. They do very granular AI-driven analysis of supply chain greenhouse gas impacts. The Yankees, and actually the ownership and the leadership of the Yankees just approved this, there's now a partnership between MIT and the Yankees so that we could get even more granular and verifiable and accurate data on the impacts, the greenhouse gas and environmental impacts of the goods and services we use at the stadium.
Let's turn that to Glenn. That's a great point about data. And I've heard Mick Peterson has said to us that you, Glenn, collect more data than any other track superintendent that they've come across or had. What's the data that you're collecting each day, and who are the experts that are helping you make decisions, for example, on what's going to happen for the balance of your day and how you're going to condition the track, for example, with storms coming?
So again, we use multiple weather services. So there's 3 different weather agencies that we have an on-call service for to be able to get, speak with the meteorologist. This morning, just going over timing of the storms, anybody knows this morning, 3:30 this morning, we missed significant rainfall that just went about 2.5 miles north of the track. So we missed about 1/4 inch of rain, and then it came in here about 5 o'clock this morning. So dealing with the weather services, we're able to get information on how we, prepare the track, what we're doing with the track, and then it's the discussions, with the racing office and the officials on, what we would do for the day. But what's important is the data that we're able to capture is, the data that we receive on the first day is different than, a week into the card, just from where on the turf course. So again, you're able to correlate not only the numbers on what you're getting for the penetrometer or the rainfall or even the time of the rainfall. So the way that the rain is measured in the increments. So a hard rain compared to a long-standing, 6-hour drizzle that gets into the course. Those are all things that play into it, but to be able to look back on that information. But it's not only just the data from the weather stations, the sensors that we use that are on a turf course when we're doing the racing up here, we're able to capture that with moisture depth on, how the profile is, what the moisture content is. And then also with the rebuild down at Belmont is the engineers that have been brought in just to design the optimal, growing medium to handle these changing conditions. So the infrastructure that's put in underneath, but also the products that are used for the new design.
What are some of the features that you have at Belmont that would surprise people that you now are planning for today?
Yeah, if I can get the slide up back on. So the green space is probably one of the biggest things that's changed at Belmont with access to the infield. So with the tunnels that are available to access basically 20 acres of now usable space. The other initiative that we've taken on is to get off of city water. So our pump station for all of our irrigation, we're now going to be able to irrigate not only the infield, but also the new 1-mile synthetic track and the new turf courses as well from well water through a Long Island well permit through New York DEC. So that's a big step. And one of the things is just trying to future-proof the building of what's underneath all the surfaces. So all that reclaimed water that I just talked about, the infrastructure that's in the infield to be able to handle storm water that's then repurposed for the irrigation, not only for the infield, but also the steps that have been taken to capture storm water off of the building. These are, millions and millions of gallons each year that we're able to now repurpose that water rather than...
I see the pond in the infield. How's that different from the one that you had previously?
Yeah, I mean, the pond that we currently have is 2 weeks worth of irrigation. It's roughly 15 million gallons. It's a lined pond. The other pond was just strictly decorative that captured storm water from some of our parking areas. So it was just basically a couple feet of just water visually for aesthetics, but this is functional for the racing operations.
Alan, Belmont Parks is a great example of public-private endeavor. From your perspective, what should sports teams, leagues, people that are planning racing facilities want to address? What should they address concerning environmental and weather-related standards?
Right. So, as we heard, there's a lot of granular operational details that you need to manage. But ultimately, what we need to do is stop making the problem worse. So reducing our contribution, our use of fossil fuels, which the scientific community, and recently, actually just last week, the International Court of Justice at The Hague settled the case by concluding that fossil fuels are the primary cause of warming climate. So what's going on throughout sports, and I'm talking about all 30 NBA teams, I'm talking about all Major League Baseball teams are now measuring, all hockey teams are measuring, the US Open, Wimbledon, the Australian Open, the French Open are all measuring, identifying opportunities to reduce greenhouse gas emissions wherever feasible, switching to electrification. And as you know, many states, New York, California, Massachusetts, Texas, Iowa, Kansas have the highest percentage of solar installed of any states in the country, and they also happen to have the lowest electricity rates as a result of that. But identifying opportunities for mitigation. Yankees will soon be receiving its first all-electric waste hauling truck. Okay, we have changed, our chillers, and we're looking, for our refrigerants. We use low global warming potential refrigerants. We're doing food donations to avoid food waste. We are measuring the food waste that we generate to reduce it, because food waste, when it goes into a landfill, emits methane, which is a very potent greenhouse gas. Everything we buy is looked at, obviously from a financial lens, but also two other lenses. One is, what does it mean in terms of its contribution to bigger ecological problems? The Yankees are, I don't need to tell you this, how visible and powerful a brand it is. They cannot be implicated in doing anything that's an environmentally destructive activity. Much of what I do, a lot of what I do, I protect the brand from engaging in environmental liabilities. And, what that means is, to the point earlier about authenticity. Everything has to be verifiable and authentic, and it takes a lot of time. We did an energy efficiency audit back in 2019, and we identified 17 enhancements for energy efficiency. And frankly, we've implemented about 4 of them over the last 6 years. It takes time to get this stuff done. Fan education. The Yankees, by the way, worked with the New York City Department of Transportation and put in 3 bike sharing stations around the stadium. The stadium already benefits. One of the things about being in New York is we have a spectacular public transit system. Personally, I really can't live anywhere without a public transit system. I'm so used to it. And the majority of fans who come to Yankee Stadium come through public transit. And fan transportation is one of the biggest greenhouse gas emitting activities associated with any sport. The Yankees promote public transit. They work with the New York City Transit Authority to have more subway cars on game days, and they've worked to put in 3 bike sharing stations around the station, and that will actually serve as an expansion of the bike infrastructure for New York City throughout the Bronx. There's so many things that are going on.
You mentioned electric. Glenn, you now have equipment in the field that is all electric, replacing gas-powered.
Yes, it's a bunch of our turf equipment. We've gone to battery-powered gators, battery-powered weed whacking equipment. We use it, specifically up here at Saratoga in the barn area when, even during race days when we're able to go through that. Also, some of the efficiencies with some of the equipment, the horse hauling equipment. So, we're looking at the next steps. Our veterinary vehicles are also electric vehicles. So for doing pre-race exams or the Lasix techs, they're all in electric vehicles as well.
So Glenn, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, to the point about information, flooding impact maps right now, FEMA maps are out of date. And people need to know that. And in fact, many businesses that I work with are using supplemental private sector analysts to study what are the climate, especially flooding impact maps for particular areas. The FEMA impact map, flooding impact map data have not been updated for perhaps almost 20 years. And given recent announcements that they're going to be cutting FEMA funding, we're not expecting those mapping enhancements that are necessary to take place. And part of it is, frankly, some, real estate interests don't want to see the FEMA flood maps expand because it's going to limit where houses could be built, but insurance companies, check with your insurance company. They know your flooding risk, And as we're seeing in California with regards to fires, as we're seeing in Florida with regards to floods and other areas, insurance costs are going up, and in some cases, like in Florida, they can only get insurance very often only from the state, because private companies will not insure because of the data that they're using with regards to flooding. So it's definitely going to affect your businesses big time financially, billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars of adverse economic impacts at sporting events and sporting communities has occurred just in the last year, and it's growing. This is the thing. This is not going away. Greenhouse gas emissions are still going up, okay? And the science is telling us they need to be going down, okay? But they're going up. And the more they go up, the more severe storms, the more disruptions we're going to experience. We're seeing more roofs. Now games that used to be played outdoors are being played under a roof. Marathons are being run at night because of the heat. The schedule of UEFA and the World Cup had to be changed from the summer to the winter. Now there's heat timeouts in professional tennis. Cricket, I've worked with Cricket Australia and the Australian Open. Cricket is under tremendous, tremendous pressure. You talk about cancellations of games and people passing out and players vomiting from the heat. I spend time in India, and around Pakistan, and of course I go to England and I watch cricket, and I work with Cricket Australia. They're very, very concerned about what these temperatures and floodings and climate is going to do. And there's no big answer. That's the thing. Every little bit matters. So as Mother Teresa said, there's no great things, only small things with great love. I spent 9 months changing the straws just for the Super Bowl. And it was a good thing, because then the Yankees used the straws too.
We've got a couple minutes left. Glenn has a couple last slides. Thank you, Alan. That's really valuable information. Thank you for being such an advocate. Glenn, take us through these last couple slides, and then we'll conclude. Thank you.
Sure. What Alan just brought up about flooding and drainage, that's probably the biggest improvement that's been made at Belmont for the new facility. So it's not a very sexy topic, but it's critical for what we're doing with the infrastructure that's there. So the reason I point that out is, the old racing surfaces had minimal drainage. The main track had small trunk lines. It was built in a different era. And again, we've made improvements here at Saratoga with the drainage at both facilities on Oklahoma and the main track. But at Belmont, as I was mentioning earlier, all the storm water, this map dictates what the different scenarios are for the drainage of both turf courses as well as the synthetic track. What you see on the western portion of this facility, where that D is that 15 million gallon storage. But you're also noticing that on the main track, every one of the little black dots on the inside and outside is stormwater drainage. So again, to keep the surfaces in the best possible condition to handle those 1, 2, 3 inch rainfall events, we're able to accommodate that now where we weren't in the past. We didn't have the infrastructure for it. And again, the green initiative on that is every one of those 200 wells that you see, the water percolates through the natural sand that's out there. So it's just a recharge basin that we're able to reuse for watering not only the synthetic, but then also the 2 turf courses. And we even have future-proofed with irrigation if we ever wanted to do anything on the main track. The other thing is just for the sustainability side of it, every one of the little dots that you see, every one of the little wells out there that you see, or ponds, that's for the dirt track drainage. So we're able to separate the material that comes off the dirt track, because anyone that's been around a true natural dirt surface knows the silt and clay that they see that travels with on a rainy day like today, impacts the drainage and will actually plug up the drainage. So the emphasis on the drainage is probably one of the key points that's changed with the construction down at Belmont, and to be able to reuse the product, for the millions and millions of gallons that I was mentioning.
That's really impressive planning. Glad you were able to share it with our audience today. Panelists, thank you very much.
Can I just add one thing? I see a lot of water bottles. If you go to a business meeting at Yankee Stadium, you will see people with refillable bottles.
at Yankee Stadium that are beautifully black because that's Yankees colors. Same for the NBA, same for Major League Soccer, same for the USTA. They have switched to refillable bottles and they're adding more hydration stations. Last point, last year, in 2023, the Australian Open had to get rid of 90,000 plastic bottles. Last year, they had to get rid of 400 because they found a partnership with Waterdrop and they switched to refillable bottles, sold them. There were lines of people going to buy them, added more hydration stations in collaboration with a sponsorship from Waterdrop, and they were literally able to reduce the amount of plastic. And remember, plastic production is petroleum and it's a very high greenhouse gas emitter. They went from 90,000 bottles to 400 bottles in 1 year just by, and actually everybody feels better about having this.
Similar ones in Keeneland.
Yeah.
Thank you all for your time.
Thanks.
Thank you, Alan.
Thanks, yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Allen, Glenn, and James. And now Everett Dobson will give the keynote speech.
Promised the staff I wouldn't go off script, but I'm going to start off script. Thanks for the yeoman's work you guys did to put this together. And thanks for the programming this morning. It's been enlightening and entertaining. So good afternoon, everyone. Let me begin by expressing how truly honored I am to serve as your next chairman of the Jockey Club. I first want to take a moment to thank Stuart Janney for his many years of service to our sport, particularly his leadership over the last decade as chair. Under his guidance, we faced difficult challenges, some that would question the very existence of our sport. Our social license to operate was indeed on the line. Today, thoroughbred racing is safer than ever, and we continue to push forward with other initiatives that will improve the sport, several of which I will talk about today. The Jockey Club was founded in 1894, and its mission, which you see on the screen, was to improve the breed and support the integrity of the sport. That remains just as relevant today, 131 years later. As I prepared to step into this role, I felt it was essential to evaluate our current initiatives and priorities through the lens of our mission. I also believe it's important to continually examine the role of the Jockey Club and the constituents we serve. Our first allegiance is to the thoroughbred horse, followed by the breeders, owners, racetrack operators, bettors, and everyone else who makes their living in this sport. To fulfill our mission, the Jockey Club must serve all of them fairly, equitably, and effectively. As you can see, the number of initiatives on the screen that we support is significant. I urge you to look at our website and see just what we are doing today. Some of the initiatives you heard about this morning: stable recovery, phenomenal work. Fast Break AI, I'm cautiously optimistic. One of the new initiatives of the Jockey Club is the Regulatory Racing Vet Fellowship, a program that awards up to $25,000 for a vet school repayment, and the winner of this year's 2025 award goes to Dr. Rebecca Butler of the Minnesota Racing Commission. Congratulations to Dr. Butler, and we thank you for your important service to the sport. My vision for this sport is one of growth. So let's take a look at a few of the metrics that are relevant today. As an aside, what we'll be looking at will include US, Canada, and Puerto Rico. So the first metric that I think is perhaps the most telling is all-source handle. As you can see, it was on a nice trajectory through 2022, but both 23 and 24 have shown slight declines. One of the most telling indicators is handle. Handle matters. It drives racetrack profitability. It reflects on our competitiveness in the broader entertainment and gaming markets, and serves as a key barometer of our sport's health. Several factors influence handle, one of which I wanted to depict here. As you can see, the number of racetracks we have in the United States and Canada has come down. And that does indeed put pressure on Handle, needless to say. I think it's also helpful to look at Handle trends in a few select states. You can see some of our larger states carry the bulk of the nationwide handle. You can also see that Kentucky and Arkansas have risen significantly since 2021. And also you can see that Illinois and Texas, two of our largest states, have fallen in handle. What else drives handle? Well, at its core, we are competing for the gambler's dollar. How do we make our content more appealing and enjoyable to bet on? Track owners are keenly focused on that, as are we. As you heard earlier, Fast Break AI was engaged to assist the industry in scheduling our races in a more thoughtful way. I'm hopeful that this initiative will provide a path to better race day scheduling, resulting in higher overall handle. Another key metric that we look at is total purse money. The economics of the racing appear to be improved. Purse money has gone up slightly. However, if you look at it over a 10-year period, it's really risen only in line with inflation. So there's work to do. However, interestingly, the number of starters that are pursuing these races has fallen from 55,000 to 44,000. The top left column depicts that. In 2014, there were 55,000 starters that raced in the U.S. and Canada in 14. That number went to 44,000 in 2024. So essentially, we had 11,000 fewer races available compared to a decade earlier, resulting in more than 9,000 fewer races. Interestingly, you can see fewer horses are chasing more money in fewer races, which would appear to be favorable to the individual horse race owners, and I agree, it is. Also to note, since 2021, the average field size has remained very consistent at around 7.4. Also, the average annual starts per runner annually in the post-HISA era appears to be settling in at or just below 6 starts per runner per year, which is down only slightly from the pre-HISA era of around 6.2 starts per year. As you can see, there is a very strong correlation between the number of horses available and the number of races we can actually run. It is perhaps the most concerning trend that affects the growth of our sport today. If we are serious about growing this sport, reversing this decline and the resulting foal crop is essential. I'll touch on that later. Okay, a few positive things. We are in the midst of, as Sean Smealy said earlier, we have incredible news to talk about when it comes to 100% bonus depreciation. Without that, we would have had one more substantial economic problem to deal with. So, Sean, Tom Rooney, I know you're here. Thank you guys so very much. This industry owes you one. And there are many other things to work on, in the Washington, D.C. area and legislation area. One of the most important elements of our industry, or any industry, is the new capital being invested. As you can see, we are in the midst of seeing over $2 billion of committed capital coming into some of our premier racing venues. These projects and others will allow us to have continued success in one of the most positive developments of our sport, and that is these marquee race days, beginning with the Kentucky Derby and Derby Week. Congratulations and thank you, Churchill Downs, leadership of Churchill Downs, for strengthening what remains one of the most iconic brands in all of sports. We also have the first Racing Pegasus Cup, the other Triple Crown races, the Preakness and the Belmont, the Derby Preps, the Arkansas Derby and Wood, and all of them, frankly. We have the Whitney Day coming up. followed by the Travers Day. These are things we need to be talking about. And of course, we have the boutique meets at Keeneland and Del Mar. And the Breeders' Cup. In 2024, their global wagering exceeded $200 million over the weekend. There were 157 starters, of which 61 were internationals. These events excite fans, elevate handle, and spotlight our sport at its very best. Perhaps more important than anything, they are gateways for inviting new owners, breeders, bettors, and influencers. With that said, the Jockey Club remains concerned about the future of some of our most important racing venues, particularly in regions of the country that are deemed to be important to the overall health of the sport. One of my highest priorities will be look at all strategic alternatives when those situations arise. Media coverage also plays a vital role. Today, racing enjoys the support of 3 key media partners, NBC, Fox, and FanDuel. Fox alone had more than 900 hours of programming in 24 and is on track for a similar number this year. NBC's coverage of the Kentucky Derby, Preakness, Breeders' Cup continues to receive rave reviews from people within the sport and those comprising the general viewing public. Thanks to those relationships, we are now more visible and accessible than ever. But to be clear, media coverage of our sport will continue to be a primary focus. Now let's turn to health and safety. I'm going to let you look at that slide for a minute. Wow, that is a remarkable achievement. The numbers speak for themselves. HISA has done a good job. Others in this industry and in this room continues to support HISA and all the other initiatives that comprise HISA, health and safety, but those are impressive numbers. Racing has never been safer for our horses and our jockeys. The Jockey Club will continue to strongly support HISA, and we need to look no further than the news we all read this week from Thistletown, where concerns about safety prompted HISA to decisively step in. You can expect us to advocate for HISA's mission while also serving as a voice of reason concerning the cost of HISA to the industry. Another foundational responsibility is aftercare. I'm going to start by reading a quote from Elliot Forbes, who is the chair of the International Forum for the Aftercare of Racehorses. I think it encapsulates a lot about aftercare that we work on daily. He said, "Some argue that deepening our commitment to aftercare is costly, that it adds complexity, but the truth is embedding aftercare and welfare into the heart of the industry isn't just an ethical imperative, it's a strategic one. A horse-centered model protects our social license, it attracts new participants and fans, it enhances the longevity and marketability of the thoroughbred well beyond its racing years." Thank you, Elliot. Well said. There are approximately 620,000 thoroughbreds in North America. Of those, call it around 44,000 will enter the starting gate, another 62 are awaiting the starting gate or are brood mares and a few stallions. So that leaves just over 500,000 brood mares that are in so-called aftercare, or I really don't like the word aftercare. I like the word after they completed their racing career. Because these athletes, they go on. It's just as important in what happens after the track. Most racehorses thrive in second careers. Retraining and rehoming should always be the preferred path, allowing these athletes to continue to compete. As the official breed registry, the Jockey Club should be both an advocate and a funding source for aftercare. We are founding members of the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance, which currently accredits 83 aftercare institutions across the country. In 2026, Jockey Club will make a meaningful increase in its funding to TAA. We also established the Thoroughbred Incentive Program, or TIP, recognizing off-track thoroughbreds in second careers, which has proven to be very popular and successful. Today, I'm excited to announce the launch of a new pilot program to expand this initiative, which will be based upon the TIP championships that have been held annually since 2017. Our vision is to create a pilot program with a series of thoroughbred-only events across North America. We see the tremendous growth the showing, eventing, and Western disciplines have experienced recently and believe there's a similar opportunity for growth for thoroughbreds in equestrian sports beyond the track. In addition, a year ago at this conference, we announced a new traceability initiative, which leveraged the digital register certificates with a mobile app to help identify thoroughbreds. We are taking another step forward, and the Board of Stewards has authorized an investment of more than 1,000 Bluetooth-enabled microchip scanners, which we will distribute to various touch points along the thoroughbred life cycle, including aftercare organizations, transportation companies, and veterinary clinics. I'm asking all that are in this room and listening online to increase your awareness and funding for aftercare. Now turning to the topic of the foal crop. In 10 years, the foal crop has fallen from 23,000 to 18,000. We all recognize that if we truly want to grow the sport, the current trend is unsustainable. So what are some of the things to examine? First, the breeding of thoroughbreds has become increasingly more commercialized. In fact, we're approaching a point where more than 50% of the annual foal crop will go through a public auction. As a result, the industry is starting to resemble an agricultural business more than ever before. Breeding decisions are now driven primarily by the anticipated sale price of the resulting foal, weighed against the rising cost of production, namely boarding expense and stallion fees. So what were the breeders up against in 2025 when they began to make some breeding decisions? Across the board, costs have risen sharply in the last several years. On the surface, if you look at the sales price, the numbers look pretty promising. There was a record volume of yearlings sold in the yearling markets in 2024. The average sale price hit a record high of $92,000. However, the median sale price tells a different story. It has risen only modestly in the 10 years from 2014 to 24. Ideas such as auction-restricted maiden races and the forthcoming rating system that are being developed by Equibase could offer support. Last December, we announced a mare incentive program, a tool that helps breeders identify certain mares that may have dropped out of the production. I'm pleased to report that more than 100 of those mares have returned to production, and we hope use of that tool will yield close to twice that amount when all the foal crop tallies are complete. Another promising initiative under discussion is the formation of regional alliances among states to combine their state breeding programs and development programs. I'm personally a big fan of that and a big believer in it. It is an initiative that the Jockey Club is prepared to assist in any way possible, including hosting meetings and researching the most effective incentive programs. The numbers suggest Kentucky is doing very well, but that doesn't mean that Kentucky is immune to the broader challenges. I include myself as a breeder and a farm owner in Kentucky when I say we need to be more supportive of the broader economic initiatives outside of the Commonwealth. Earlier, we heard about the remarkable impact Griffin Johnson has made and continues to make in our sport. When ABR was founded in 2012, this is exactly the type of positive influence we envision. Thank you to Griffin and Terry Finley, West Point, the West Point Thoroughbreds, and of course the Arkansas Derby winner, Sandman, and Ewing now, of course. That's a vision that, frankly, few in this room, other than maybe Griffin, had even 5 years ago. Griffin's story underscores the power of positive messaging in thoroughbred racing, but it also reveals a broader need. Our sport would benefit greatly from a unified, comprehensive national marketing strategy. We need a program that not only amplifies Griffin's voice to his 14+ million followers, but also supports key stakeholders across the spectrum of racetracks in North America. The Jockey Club is committed to taking a leadership role in advancing this effort. Together, we can build a stronger and more connected future of thoroughbred racing. As many of you know, the Jockey Club previously attempted to implement a cap on the number of mares a single stallion could breed. While that effort did not succeed, the underlying concerns it aimed to address remain very real. This slide illustrates the trends in North America. However, the phenomenon is happening worldwide. And while the U.S. is the largest producer of thoroughbreds, we only represent approximately 20% of the global foal crop. Whether you believe we're facing a serious issue or not, it is critical that we keep this conversation going, and to do so on a global scale. To that end, the Jockey Club of the United States is currently chairing the inbreeding task force of the International Studbook Committee. Our focus is to dig deeper into the science and leverage emerging tools, including artificial intelligence and advanced technology, to better understand the long-term impact on the breed. At the same time, I fully recognize the economic realities of the industry we operate in. My role is to preserve the integrity and health of the breed while fostering an environment of innovation and investment. That's why I plan to engage directly with the leading stallion farms, not only in the U.S., but around the world, to continue this important dialogue. As I mentioned at the top of the speech, the Jockey Club's constituency that it serves is broad. And a highly important part of our sport is, in fact, the bettor, as they provide the trust that runs the sport. Handle. I say highly important because I bet myself. I further recognize the deep divide on the matter of computer-assisted wagering, or CAW. I plan to use this position to better understand that issue and try to help the industry strike the right balance that ensures growth but does not disenfranchise the retail bettor. I look forward to my discussions with the interested parties and working towards practical solutions. Now let's turn to the for-profit subsidiaries of the Jockey Club, businesses many of you know well. These companies have been developed over many years and include two major partnerships, Equibase in collaboration with the Thoroughbred Racing Associations of America, and Bloodhorse in partnership with TOBA. Each of these ventures offers a wide range of products, but they all share one essential purpose: providing critical support to the broader thoroughbred ecosystem. One of my commitments, together with our management team at the Jockey Club and the Board of Stewards, is to take a fresh look at these businesses. Our goal is to ensure their operations continue to align closely with the Jockey Club's core mission and serve the long-term interest of the sport. In closing, let me acknowledge the unwavering commitment so many of you have shown in advancing the cause of health and safety in our sport. We understand the stakes, and we are truly committed to ensuring we never take a step backward. For the first time in recent memory, health and safety has become a strength, not a weakness. My vision for thoroughbred racing is rooted in growth. Some see it as the cranes and construction shaping our iconic venues. Others experienced it through the thrill of placing a simple $2 win bet. Still others feel it in the energy, elegance, and camaraderie of a major race day. No matter how you engage with our sport, one thing is clear: we have a powerful story to tell, one of momentum, passion, and promise. The excitement of betting, owning, or breeding a racehorse is alive and well across this country every single day. We invite you to be a part of it. Thank you very much, and that closes the conference.